Meanwhile, the controversial documentary Waiting for Superman about America's schools has everybody talking about the nation's public school system and what's matter with it and why it is failing our students. Are teachers to blame or the unions to protect them? Our next guest says both. Danny Kofke is a special ed teacher and author of How to Survive and Perhaps Thrive on a Teacher's Salary, and he joins us live this morning from Atlanta. Danny, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on.
When you first started out in the teaching business, you were a kindergarten teacher, and you were a member of the union. Why?
Well, the protections that they offered. Unfortunately, in today's times, we're kind of in a lawsuit type of society, and I just felt like, especially a male teaching younger students, that, I did need that protection just in case, there was a false accusation, laid on me. Right,
exactly. And so now you're working with special needs kids, and there are always a couple of other adults in the room. So you no longer, down there in Georgia, belong to a union, and it's not mandated that you do. But now, you don't know that unions are such a good idea when it comes to the school setup. I know you haven't seen Waiting for Superman. It hasn't gotten to your town yet. But explain why unions are not such a good thing for you, in your estimation.
Well, they were created and they do fight for our salaries and for our benefits. And I think that is a good thing. But then when you hear some of these horror stories of the union protecting teachers that are not making wise decisions and that are doing some bad things, I think it puts a negative spin on our entire teaching profession. And then it does, in my estimation, it kind of gives the union partially a black eye because they're not, when you protect a bad teacher, you're not doing what's right for the children.
Sure.
And most teachers get into the profession because they have a passion for it and they get into it to do what's right for the children. And then when we hear people being protected that aren't doing the things that are right for our students, that isn't, that's not right.
Right. And I think you told one of our producers in your school that the unions protected this bad teacher who just, the kids would come in and, hey, let's watch a movie. Let's watch the television.
Right.
I don't feel like teaching today. Oh, man.
Right, and that was, I remember I was a fairly new teacher at that point, and I remember thinking, you know what, I could go back to my classroom and I could teach the most dynamic lessons, and my kids could, grow 5 grade levels that year, and this teacher that's watched videos every single afternoon still made more money than I did. And not that we get into it for the money, but that isn't right.
Sure. Speaking of money, one of the reasons why state budgets are so racked right now is because of the high cost of pensions and stuff like that. I know a deal's a deal, but going forward, should teacher tenure perhaps be eliminated?
Teacher tenure was created because you could have an administrator that didn't necessarily like a teacher and they could get rid of them. So, the premise of it and why it was created was good, but now it's, instead of earning tenure, it's almost a guarantee. If you work in some school districts for 2 years, you're automatically guaranteed tenure. You don't have to earn it anymore. And I think that's where, we have to, take a look at it to where it should not necessarily be an automatic. If you're a good teacher, I think, you might be able to deserve it. It might take a few more years than 2 years to get it. But when it's just kind of a given and automatic, I think it needs to be relooked at.
Well, you would know. You're in the trenches every day. Danny Kofke, teaching down there in Georgia. He's got a book out. It's called How to Survive on a Teacher's Salary. Danny, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on again, Steve.
You bet.